Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to All Era Sports with Sirhan live on streaming on the X platform. As I come to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Hope everyone enjoyed Wild Card Weekend and, of course, the college football playoff. I'll touch on those here later on tonight. An historic upset took place in Super Bowl history. I relook on that historical moment. Also, karma came for a drug cheat in the boxing community over the weekend. I'll give him that dose of it as I talk about the sports fight game later on in the show. Of course, I got the gloves. I'll be touching on that all the time. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Let's go get right down to it. Of course, over the weekend, it was wild card weekend. And we talk about 4 of the 5 games. Maybe the word wild is what fits wild card weekend to mere perfection. When you think about what took place with 4 of the games, I mean, let's start with this one Saturday night. We talk about the Rams and the Panthers. Remember what happened toward the end of the season? That Carolina stunned the Rams by just finding ways to score points on them. They almost did it again. The Rams looked like they were in control early. It looked like the Panthers was going to come on. It looked like the Rams tried everything they can to hold them off until the late touchdown by Bryce Young to put them up. Then, of course, Matthew Stafford methodically drives down the field to score the goal, which I'd be go ahead and game-winning touchdown drive of 80-plus yards. And basically, largely because the Carolina defense sold. That's exactly what happened, and exactly how and why what took place Saturday night happened over in Carolina. And it was a breath of fresh air just to get out of there if you're the Rams, who was pegged as a Super Bowl favorite. But once again, the defense and the special teams nearly cost them this one, as it cost them some big games earlier this season, especially we talk about a loss in Philadelphia and the one earlier in Carolina almost cost them again. A missed field goal, a block punt that set up an easy touchdown. And they're going to have to clean that up when they head to what's about to take place this Sunday. But this was supposed to be a Super Bowl favorite. When you talk about that offense with Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Tyler Higbee, Kyren Williams, and Blake Corum. But your defense and special teams just gives up the worst times, the biggest plays possible. But you're lucky you escaped because Carolina on the last series couldn't complete a pass to save their lives. So the Rams dodged a massive bullet, but there's work to do moving forward, especially if this team is going to be a so-called Super Bowl favorite. So good luck down the line with that one, because your opponent is going to be the Chicago Bears this coming Sunday over at Soldier Field. And speaking of wild, a tale of 2 halves in this particular game. We talk about this one. The first half, there was nothing to be found for the Bears offense. The intentional interception by Caleb Williams early, and Jordan Love was putting on a masterpiece in the first half, and it looked like they were going to roll away with it. But the second half, the Bears defense got to it, stepped up, started to make stops. And as the game was going on, Caleb Williams started to find his rhythm, started to make clutch plays, especially the 4th and 8 to Roma Dunze. And at that point, the Bears looked like they were going to try and make a comeback. Of course, Green Bay scores a late touchdown to try to hold them off, but a missed extra point by Robert McManus. And of course, the missed field goal at the end of the half came back to bite them, because Caleb Williams drove down the field, led Chicago to the game-winning touchdown, and Chicago advances to host the Rams this coming Sunday for the NFC divisional round. A wild game all over the place, and of course, we talk about the Green Bay angle. It's got a lot of Packers fans all over the place, understandably so, with Matt LaFleur's job and how the Bears, how the Packers just played not to lose. It's back to what I talked about during the season, playing to win versus playing not to lose. You saw it in this game Saturday night, in Chicago, where Green Bay had to control the game, but essentially was playing not to lose, Because when Chicago was coming, Green Bay didn't have any answers when Chicago's defense was coming, and so too was Caleb Williams. And because of it, Green Bay started to get smaller, and Chicago just took advantage of it, put the foot down, went out there, got the win, and now they get to host the Rams this coming Sunday. And I think it's going to be a pretty darn good divisional round playoff. But you're Green Bay, that's going to haunt you for a while, because when you lose games like that you have under control, especially when it's under the microscope against a hot division rival like you have with Chicago at Soldier Field, it's going to be tough to recover from. And there's going to be some questions that are going to have to be answered moving forward if Green Bay wants to get back into that particular position again. Can they? Possible, because they still have the talent on that roster. But you can't put, in other words, a psychological hold like that, what it does when you blow a game like that, we have under control. Actually, you want a better answer for that? Ask the 1993 Oilers, who had a 35-3 lead against the Bills in that wild card game. And Buffalo just came roaring back, and Houston was never to be seen again at that level. Not saying you're going to get to that point for Green Bay after Saturday, but there's something to think about moving forward. We're going to have a doozy of an NFC divisional round Sunday when the Rams play the Bears. Going to be a lot of questions both ways. I'll go on that to get my pick later this week. So that's the Saturday till the game's on Sunday. We'll start with what took place in Jacksonville. And boy, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. We'll start with this. You're averaging nearly 12 yards a carry if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. Why do you put the ball in the hands of a quarterback who's known not to make the right play at the right time? You should be giving these running backs at least 30 to 35 carries in that game against Buffalo Sunday, and you would have won it. You didn't. You were so sick-headed, obsessed in wanting Trevor Lawrence to be a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson when he never was. And because of it, that's why you guys are sitting home. You guys should have been giving your running back, Trevor Etienne, multiple carries against a 30th ranked run defense, because every time you ran it, you was pounding it down their throat and gashing them. But you didn't give it to him enough, and that's why you're sitting at home. And of course, on the Buffalo side, Josh Allen, beat up as he is, put on his Superman cape again and willed Buffalo to victory and showed why he was probably the best quarterback in the NFL at the moment. But if you're Jacksonville, you had one of the premier run offenses. You're going against a 30th ranked run defense. You're averaging about 12 yards a carry. At one point, he was averaging 12 yards a carry. Why did you get 30 to 35 run plays? You're playing the 30th ranked run defense. You should be running the ball 30 to 35 times a game. That's a no-brainer. If you're not, you're begging for a loss. That's what happened. And of course, 2 turnovers by Trevor Lawrence. One of the intentional interception that basically iced it, which I don't know what he was thinking on that throw. And of course, the moronic decision by Liam Cohen to go for it on 4th and 2 inside of own 10, which also backfired. And of course, I could say the end of the half field goal by Cam Little, but Cam Little rarely misses. I'm not going to pin that on him. But you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're playing the 30th ranked run defense. You have ran barely 15 to 16 run plays, but you was averaging 13 yards a carry. You're begging for a loss. You begged for a loss. And Buffalo gave you the loss, and now you're sitting at home. You got what you deserved, or because you didn't want to run the ball 35 times a game. That's what you should have stuck to, because every time you ran it on Buffalo, you were successful, but you didn't run it enough. Because you thought you were so sick-headed, obsessed with running a quarterback who's basically in the 25 to 30 range ranking-wise. I'm talking bottom 5 in the NFL, thinking he's Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow when he's not, or Josh Allen for that matter. Throwing 2 intentional interceptions and basically costing you the game. That loss falls on him because he didn't know how to be smart. Also, your head coach, Liam Cohen, and your offensive coordinator, Press Taylor, who didn't like calling run plays, and they can't say why. You were playing the 30th ranked run defense. You were averaging about 12 yards a carry at one point, but you wanted to throw the ball, and that's why you're sitting at home. Good luck trying to bounce back on this one, because you got lucky with the AFC South this year because the Texans got off to such a slow start, and you were lucky to be in that position, but you couldn't capitalize on it that's why you're at home. You're probably going to be there for a while after yesterday. Now for Buffalo, beat up all over the place because it was a brutal game. And you're going to travel to the number 1 seed, Denver, on a short turnaround. And we know what's been written about the so-called fraudulent number 1 seed in Denver. You're Buffalo. You have a chance to just come out of the ashes and do something like that, sort of like what Pittsburgh did in 2005 as a 6th seed when they ran through Cincinnati, Indy, and Denver to get to the Super Bowl. Or like what Joe Flacco did with Baltimore, running the Ravens past Indy, New England, and Denver to get to their Super Bowl. You have a golden opportunity here, but it's going to take a more monumental effort all the way around because you got away with a lot Sunday against Jacksonville. You probably might not get away with this Saturday at Denver. But I expect you guys to come ready to play, and I think that was going to be a hard-hitting smash mouth affair. Going to be another throwback game. May the best team win. Now to that concludes that one. Now to what took place in Philadelphia. Lots to unpack with this one. Defending champ Philadelphia Eagles knocked out of the playoffs by the 49ers. This is the same 49ers team who was lost for dead in the season home finale against Seattle for the 1 seed, and there was no effort. They were just left for dead. And they traveled cross country to play the Philadelphia Eagles, who, out of knowledge, got the scrapped wins just to get to 11-6 in the division, but it was basically theirs by midseason. You play a San Francisco team who had no life after that embarrassing effort to Seattle at home, traveling cross country onto your field, and you let that team just punk you on your field and your style of play. And because of it, now you're sitting at home. And everything that was said about you all season long, just like I said about some of the other past Super Bowl champs in your position, now you're sitting at home, and there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to have to answer there. We talk about A.J. Brown. Apparently, they say he didn't make a effort to make a catch right to him, but I thought it was just a poor throw by Jalen Hurts. The defense just got punched in the mouth, especially when Juwan Jennings burned you for a long touchdown pass. If you let Juwan Jennings burn you for a long touchdown pass, you're going home. That's what happened. And Jalen Hurts, who everybody in the Philadelphia community wanted to put in the same conversation as Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, crapped the bed yesterday and showed why he's not. And he had a stacked roster. And what happened? The 49ers, who had no life after Seattle, no life. They had less life than after you slashed air out of the tires. That's how limited life they had. And because of it, you're sitting at home because you let them come to your turf and punk you. The score wasn't as indicative as what the game was, only because Brock Purdy still throws intentional interceptions. But Philadelphia, that's going to be a hard one for you to swallow for a long time. And consider the drama that took place with A.J. Brown and Nick Sirianni. It's going to be a longer offseason because now, like the last offseason, A.J. Brown's going to be a part of trade speculation, and that's something the Philadelphia front office is going to have to find a way to manage because it's going to be crazy this offseason over there. And we talk about that team putting that quarterback, Jalen Hurts, on a pedestal he had no business being on to begin with, just because he got 2 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years and won one. You had your chance to show the whole show you could be at least somewhat in that conversation, but you just dropped your drawers and took a dump at the bed. That's exactly what happened. And good luck this offseason, because there's a lot of changes probably going to have to be made. Now for San Francisco. Forget about skill. After what happened in Seattle, you showed heart. Just going cross country after a lifeless effort, go to the backyard of the Super Bowl champ and beat them. Actually, I said punk him. Game wasn't as close as the score indicated. And now you have another opportunity to face the number 1 seed Seattle Seahawks Saturday night. Well, I think it was going to be a pretty damn good game up in the Pacific Northwest. You have a chance to right the wrong you had at home in the season finale when you just no-showed and have a chance to pull a shocker there like you did yesterday in Philadelphia. To say, I said yesterday, I'm not going to write anything off or anything. It's going to be a better game than people think because the 49ers know the Seahawks just as much as the other way around. And after what they did yesterday in Philadelphia, with all the injuries they went through all season, and now losing George Kittle for the year with the Achilles, they have a better shot than you think. Kyle Shanahan deserves his flowers for having this team prepped up, and so too does Robert Saleh, their defensive coordinator, who came up with a brilliant defensive game plan to shut down the Philadelphia offense and just make life terrible for the Eagles' offensive front and find a way to get the win. It's going to be a different atmosphere in Seattle, but after yesterday, don't write them off because we have division rivals like this playing with a third time, even though they split the first two games. Remember, earlier this season, the 49ers won in Seattle, so that gives them a fighting chance. That one's going to be a good one. Now to what took place last night, and that's just set everybody ablaze when we talk about the elite quarterback talk. It was the Chargers getting pounded by the Patriots. Given as close as the score was, only reason because Mike Vrabel likes settling for field goals and he hates scoring touchdowns. That's why Mike Vrabel likes settling for field goals and he hates scoring touchdowns. That's why the game was closer than the score really was. The score was closer than the game really was. I apologize because the Patriots just pounded Justin Herbert all game long. Let's start with a few things here real quick. With the Patriots, first game jitter for Drake May, but found a perfect game-winning pass to Henry, and what turned out to be the clincher, and that was it. The defense, they got Milton Williams back, and it's vital because he was a linchpin to that run defense for the longest time till he got IR'd, came back and solidified things, and that defense just went after Justin Herbert. And when you have missing your two top tackles, and Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, like the Chargers were, what do? You go after the quarterback. Brilliant game plan down the line by the Patriots, and they was able to do that. Now to the other side, and that's Mr. Justin Herbert. Yes, you're missing your two offensive tackles. I get it. But let's remember this. You guys sat the season finale in Denver to get the 7th seed, thinking the Patriots were the weak link in the AFC, and you matched up better with them. But you only settled for a field goal in an entire game. And the offense, maybe I can count 3 times, they were deep in New England territory. And you settled for 3 points. And you know what was written about you, that being Justin Herbert, after the embarrassing loss to Houston in last year's playoffs. You found a way to look even worse. And now everything that's coming at you is well-deserved. If you're going to slander Josh Allen, you're going to slander Lamar Jackson. I mean, it's well-deserved. But Justin Herbert deserves as much of it as the other two did when they missed the playoffs, because you wanted this matchup, you got it, but you couldn't get the job done. It wasn't how you get the job done. You got beat up all over the place. The game wasn't as close as the score was. I said the only reason why it was closer was because Mike Vrabel hates touchdowns. But you guys and Justin Herbert, it's time for some serious conversations about the so-called elite quarterback talk. And I said all along, you was a distant 4th behind the big 3, which is Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson. But that distance might be getting bigger because now this happened yesterday to him, sets him back even further. And he's as good as any quarterback when he's on. But when you have 3 playoff losses the way he has, a 27-0 lead against Jacksonville, he blew it. The 4 intentional interception game against Houston last year, and just laying an egg here and not getting to the end zone once, especially when the Patriots lost their top 2 cornerbacks, Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez, at some point in the game. All of that happens, and you can't get anything more than a field goal, and you're paid to be an elite quarterback, just like Allen and Jackson are among many others, are subject to criticism. Same goes with Justin Herbert. Yes, he missed his top 2 offensive tackles. Yes, Najee Harris was out for the year, and Omari Hampton was basically a banged-up running back going into this game. I understand it, but it's not an excuse. Because look at what happened to Jacksonville with Buffalo had banged-up guys, and Josh Allen willed Buffalo to victory in Jacksonville. You trying to tell me Justin Herbert can't do that? I mean, if you tell me he can't do that, it might be time for a serious conversation about his place among the elite quarterbacks. And remind you, just like Cincinnati did with Joe Burrow's contract, Charger fans did the same thing with Justin Herbert, demanding he get paid for the longest time, and he got it. And now we have this. At some point, you got to be real with yourself. And no one's saying Justin Herbert can't play quarterback in the NFL. That's just stupid. And I'll never go that far because I think that's stupid. But you're Justin Herbert, and everybody pegged you in that elite category with Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. You've had 3 playoff appearances. Great, the Chargers are the Chargers. I get it. But you have 3 playoff appearances, and it's not the fact you lost those 3 games. It's A, how you lost those 3 games, and B, how you performed in those 3 games. It starts to magnify itself even more, especially when you consider how you lost the previous 2 playoff games, how you blew that 27-0 lead in Jacksonville, and he threw those 4 intentional interceptions in Houston. And now we have this. It adds up. And the conversation and the criticisms are warranted right now until you get into the playoffs and perform as you're capable of and getting off the hook. Do I think it is possible? Yes. I mean, Justin Herbert's as good as any quarterback. I've said this all along. I mean, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, a Burrow, Jordan Love, a lot of others. He's in that conversation. Yes, he is. But we can't get it done at this time of year. That's where everything shows. And it shows more in the playoffs than it does in the regular season. And now the theory is always going to be until proven otherwise. Justin Herbert's a great regular season quarterback who can't perform in the postseason. Yes, other great quarterbacks have had that distinction for the longest time. Peyton Manning was one. I know Tom Brady's had some of his criticism of his, among many others. I know some do it for Lamar Jackson, but I can't say anything now because he's not in the playoffs. But now you better get it done. I said you got to get it done this season just to get a 1 playoff win. They're not asking for a Super Bowl run, just 1 playoff win. You tanked to get the 7th seed, thinking you had a better matchup with the Patriots than you did against the Jaguars. And I get it because the Jaguars punked you earlier in the season. But you showed up to LA, to Foxborough, just to show up and do nothing else. And that's a bad look all the way around. And if all these other quarterbacks are going to get this criticisms across the board like we see in recent years, so too should Justin Herbert. And he's a damn good quarterback. I've said it all along. But no passes for this guy because it was another chance for him to show he belongs, but didn't show up. I get why Chargers fans try to make excuses because I see the same thing with Bengals fans. But I said this with Joe Burrow, and I'll say it also with Justin Herbert. And if he's terrible, he deserves criticism just as much as any quarterback in the league. Nobody should be exempt from it. That's all that has to be said. Do I think they can bounce back? Possibly. But it's going to take a lot to get back there again. Because they're going to be they're in the AFC West. The Broncos are going to be there. Kansas City's going to find a way to get themselves back into the mix. And the rest of the AFC, and we know how strong the AFC is. So there's work to be done with the Chargers, but you still have Justin Herbert for everything I've said, but you got to get back to work and get started soon. You just got to get 1 win, and we'll see where that goes from there. Now for the Patriots, they're going to play the winner of the Steelers-Texans game tonight, which I think is going to be a pretty a low-scoring smash-mouth game. I probably favor them over either of them. Of course, they're going to make a big hup over the so-called weak schedule they had, but they got the 2 seed and they got a playoff win, so that gives them confidence moving forward. We'll see what happens Sunday when they play the Houston-Pittsburgh winner. Now to something here in Cincinnati. I'll touch on this for just about 5 minutes before I divulge it to the deep end of my show. Because once again, Cincinnati finds themselves in the news for the interesting reasons. So I guess I'll just chime in on this and I'll just put it into it. And this is too easy. On Friday, the so-called de facto GM, Duke Tobin, had his presser after an intentional failure by the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, which we know the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are intentional failures. Basically, just give an off-season review. And I'm listening to this. I'm listening to this. I mean, I make fun of those Chat GPT things we have. This was a Chat GPT press conference in the sense of telling everybody what they wanted to hear versus what they needed to hear. And because of it, we can brace ourselves in Cincinnati for more failures. Let's start with the first thing. First thing he called out was a better record. Okay, you called out a better record. Yeah, you're right. Your team needs a better record. You're not going to do anything at 7-10. I mean, you didn't win the division at 7-10. But how are you going to get to that better record is something that was asked and you couldn't answer. And that's where the failures show. And when you talk about the failures, it seemed like they were acceptable. You didn't hear this. Let me back up. When you talk about the failures, you didn't hear about these failures during 9 and 8 seasons the previous 2 years where they missed the playoffs. But you heard about this after you missed 7-10. And it seems like you guys are trying to get to 9 and 8, and that's the standard. You're paying 3 guys, your top 3 guys, you know who they are, a total of nearly $115, $120 million a year from now to whenever the contracts end. And you want a better record, but we didn't hear this when you guys were 9 and 8. No press conference at 9 and 8. No, no job is safe when you're 9 and 8. You're essentially trying to get to 9 and 8 and thinking that's going to get you places. Pittsburgh won the division with 10 wins. The 2 years before that, Baltimore won it with 12 and 13 wins. And the second place team in that division had 8 or 9 wins. You're trying to tell me 9 and 8 is going to be good enough to get you somewhere in Cincinnati? This is why I stopped dealing with a bunch of you guys a long time ago. And I'll say this again. I said I'm going to be brief with this. I'll touch on this later this week because I didn't hear the whole thing. I listened to just the highlights of it. The Bengals fans, the Cincinnati media, all members of it. Kelsey Conway, who's a coward. James Rapian, who's an arrogant coward. Excuse me. Apologize for the language. Ben Baby, Mike Pachaglia, and the list goes on and on. They're cowards. And also, just like the Bengals fans and the Bengals fans also, who is filled with cowards and among many other things, they're all puppets of Mike Brown, Zach Taylor. If I'm listening to this press conference and I'm seeing everybody tweet whatever the hell they want to tweet, the Bengals fans are now Duke Tobin puppets because they got you suckered in to thinking something good is going to happen. And because we have the puppets in the Bengals community when it comes to the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, you can expect more failures moving forward. Now, remember, you guys were putting Joe Burrow in the same conversation as some of the top quarterbacks today. Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Herbert, Jordan Love, C.J. Stroud, when he's outside of it. I thought Jamar Chase is in the same conversation as Jerry Rice, Antonio Brown, or Calvin Johnson, or Larry Fitzgerald when he's not. These same puppets are fine with the 9 and 8 season, but they think 9 and 8 season is the greatest thing they ever had. And because of it, that's why we're going to have more failures. The puppets in the Bengals community, Bengals fans, Cincinnati media, and we're talking about puppets of Mike Brown, Duke Tobin, and Zach Taylor, because that's what they all are, got what they wanted, but it's nothing more than that. And because you got what you wanted, and you get anything more than that, good luck next season. And if you have the same thing next season, the 2026-27 offseason is going to be a wild and turbulent ride I don't want to be a part of. You're taking the stocks of Enron that crashed, the Titanic that sank, and the crash at Hindenburg once upon a time, putting it all together, and you get the Cincinnati Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media of the last 3 years because they're a mitigated disaster because they're fine with being Mike Brown puppets. They're fine being Zach Taylor puppets. And now they're fine being Duke Tobin puppets. And because of it, that's why everything's about to happen the way it is. And I'm not feeling sorry for anyone because you ruin it for everyone by being puppets. I'll touch more on this later this week. I'll have to listen to the whole thing in detail. I just got bits and pieces of it because it was not worth my time listening to a Mike Brown puppet, and that's Duke Tobin. I'll get further analysis down the line. Now to an historical moment in NFL and sports history before I touch on other ones. And this one was a gold standard of upsets. And this one probably set the tone for upsets for down the line. It took place 35 years ago. This was, of course, Super Bowl III, live from the Orange Bowl in Miami. It was the New York Jets, led by Broadway Joe Namath, going against the Baltimore Colts, who had an undefeated season under head coach Don Shula, facing the New York Jets, who was the AFL champions under Weeb Eubank, who was a one-time Baltimore Colt head coach. And mind you, that was a Super Bowl, first one ever, because back then it was dubbed as the AFL NFL championship, because you had the NFL winner and the AFL winner. You had Baltimore as an NFL winner and the Jets as the AFL winner. And Baltimore was flirting with a perfect season going to this particular game. Excuse me, they were 13-1. I apologize. I misread the record. I do apologize for that. They were 13-1, being Baltimore, against the 11-3 New York Jets, led by, of course, Broadway Joe Namath. Now, we talk about Joe Namath, what he did that year. I mean, he didn't have the numbers that wowed you, but he did something right to get to this point. You talk about a player who had 187 completions on 380 attempts, which is a shade under 50%, threw for 3,100 yards, but he had 15 touchdowns and 17 interceptions, and a passer rating of only 72. And going against the Baltimore Colts, we talk about this particular team. Pull this up here. The Baltimore Colts were led by the head coach of Don Shula. And we talk about this particular game and why is it considered an upset. The Colts were a 19-point favorite, which is unheard of at that level at that time in any championships level sports. I mean, they were 19-point favorites. When you think about what they did going into this particular game with the Colts and the Jets, question was, could the Jets even hang? Because they got to 11-3 and they won the AFL championship, but nobody thought, they had a chance. So we have a mastermind at the level of what Don Shula was. That's what this was all about. So we fast forward to this particular game here a little bit. I'll touch on some highlights of the season as we go on. I mean, the Baltimore Colts, a couple years before, lost the AFL championship game to Cleveland, and thought they would get to this point again. So they won a tiebreaker over. Back up. They lost a tiebreaker to Green Bay in 66-67 before they got to this point where they just stopped the league. And you talk about an offense in the Colts who was second overall and scoring 402 points, led by Jimmy Orr, who had 29 receptions for 700-plus yards, and Willie Richardson, who had 37 receptions for 600 yards. Now, mind you, it's a different game back then. I mean, yards after catch wasn't as big of a thing as it is today. I'm sure the numbers would have been more inflated at that time. Facing the New York Jets, And we talk about these two going on the way they did. The Colts got two dominating wins over Minnesota and Cleveland, where they were both shutouts. I mean, they were essentially shutouts where they had Minnesota under control for that particular game, and then shut out the Cleveland Browns. And then we talk about New York getting to that point. They faced a red hot Oakland Raiders team who dismantled the Chiefs 41-6. And then we got to the point to the AFC title game, the AFL, excuse me. They found a way to get to the championship by beating the Chargers. I apologize if I get this wrong because the bracket's inside out. But we fast forward to the game. The real story of this: Joe Namath guaranteed victory. Joe Namath guaranteed victory in this game, where basically when it was brought back to the Colts brass and the Colts players that Joe Namath guaranteed it. One of the Colts players essentially laughed at it, thinking it wasn't going to happen. And because we consider how the Jets escaped winning the AFL championship and how Baltimore just dismantled Cleveland, everybody was laughing. And remember, Baltimore was a 19-point favorite, and that's why we had what we had. So we talk about going to this game. Actually, there's only one play worth talking about when you talk about this game, and it took place in the second quarter. It was third down, where we had the quarterback Earl Burrell trying to throw a touchdown pass into the end zone. It was tipped by one of the defensive linemen off the air to tight end Tom Mitchell, and it was picked off by Randy Beverly for a touchback. And from there on, we talk about what took place from there on. The Jets marched down the field 80 yards to score the only touchdown of the game. And it was capped out by a touchdown run by Matt Snell, who on that drive had 47 of those yards. And Joe Namath basically just went 3 for 4 on the drive. And 47 of those yards went to Matt Snell, who capped it off with a 4-yard touchdown run. And from that point, the Jets defense just put the clamps on the Baltimore offense that was second in the league at that point. It was scoring points. And the Jets resorted to the traditional 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense. And that's why they was able to pull off the shocker of Super Bowl III backing Joe Namath's guarantee. Now we talk about Joe Namath in this particular game. 17 for 28, 200-plus yards. Didn't throw a touchdown, but didn't turn the ball over. And he was named the Super Bowl MVP. The only quarterback I can think of who's ever won a Super Bowl MVP without throwing a touchdown pass. And this says a lot about that particular game. But that play, when the interception took place by, if I pronounce his name correctly, when the interception took place and Namath ran it down for the touchdown, that was it. And that's why we had the historical upset, probably still the greatest upset in Super Bowl history when you think about it. We consider being a 19-point favorite and the type of offense Baltimore had, especially after stopping Cleveland, and now the Jets barely got to the AFL champions and get to that Super Bowl. That's why Baltimore had the heavy favorite. And at one point, the quarterback was benched for a fellow named Johnny Unitas with Baltimore. That's how bad it was. But it didn't matter because the game was already out of hand. And Joe Namath got the win at Super Bowl III. Probably the greatest upset in Super Bowl history. I still call it to this day for all those reasons. Now, we're going to spin it off to the upsets. We talk about some of the great ones we had in our time. Of course, I'll dive more into this down the line when I talk about the Douglas Tyson fight. But we talk about some of the great upsets. Probably top 3, we talk about Super Bowl III with the Miracle on Ice and, of course, Douglas versus Tyson. And of course, there's a lot of other ones in this conversation. We talk about what took place. Maybe the Super Bowl upset behind Super Bowl III was, of course, the New York Giants in 2007 shocking the undefeated New England Patriots, who were marching toward the Super Bowl and their path for perfection, where Eli Manning happened. That was probably the closest thing to a Super Bowl III upset we ever saw. where we had some shockers, but not quite like that. And that was classified in that conversation because it looked like the Patriots were stomping the league. And remember, they about to play the David Tyree play. The Patriots had Eli Manning in the grasp. Somehow he breaks loose and throws a mini Hail Mary pass to David Tyree. And from that point, you could sense the Patriots defense was deflated. And Eli Manning, of course, they go ahead and game winner to Plaxico Burress. And that's why that might be the closest thing to a Super Bowl upset to Super Bowl III that we'll ever have for all those reasons. Because the Patriots had that quite a few times, but couldn't put it away. Now we talk about some of the other sports upsets in that conversation with Super Bowl III. As I mentioned, Miracle on Ice. We know the story about that one in 1980. The Buster Douglas upset of Mike Tyson. We know the story about that one, 42-1, which means like 420,000-1, because nobody wanted to bet on the fight for obvious reasons. We talk about some of the other ones. Of course, maybe the more recent one in hockey, the Florida Panthers over the Boston Bruins. When Boston was up 3-1 and had that series under control, Florida came back to steal the Stanley Cup from Boston. The 1969 Miracle Mets, after being one of the worst teams in expansion history, upsetting the Baltimore Orioles, who were a powerhouse at that time, to win the World Series. It was go to collegiate. Of course, collegiate's going to have it all over the place. Maybe the poster child still, Villanova over Georgetown. When you think about what took place on that day, when they had the Villanova team just shot the lights off the ball against the powerhouse Georgetown, led by Patrick Ewing and coached by John Thompson. That's also up there. And of course, in other collegiates, the 2 times a 16 seed knocked out a number 1 over the last 8 years. UMBC over Virginia in 2018, where they just ran Virginia out, blew them out by 20. And of course, the other one was what took place shortly thereafter. It was Farley Dickinson over Purdue 5 years later. Same thing. I mean, Farley Dickinson escaped, beating the number 1 seed Purdue. And those were your collegiate upsets, 16-1. And there was a time when everybody thought 16-1 was never going to happen. Not only did it happen, happened twice in a 5-year period. Those 2 times in the last 10 years, when you think about it. And it goes to show, in a single game elimination, anything can happen. So we had those upsets in the collegiate game. And among many others, I'll touch on the sports upsets later on when I do the Douglas Tyson show in February. But Super Bowl III was a gold standard of championship level upsets. We consider everything that took place. Baltimore, like, slowly easing into the Super Bowl, winning the NFL championship, and the Jets barely getting to the AFL championship, and Joe Namath not having the greatest seasons. But Joe Namath put his money where his mouth is, backed it up with a very efficient performance. And after the interception, that scored all the way to the was led to the touchdown for Matt Snell, who on that touchdown drive controlled the tempo with the 3 yards in a cloud of dust, was able to shock the Baltimore Colts, coached by the legendary Don Shula. And that's why we had the tremendous upset that took place over 55 years ago tonight at the Orange Bowl in Miami. Still the gold standard of upsets, at least in Super Bowl history. I'll touch on more of those down the line, because I have a show of upsets, and I'm going to do that later on. Now that takes care of the entire NFL segment. Let's move over to college football. And let's start with what took place with Ole Miss and Miami. I mean, classic game. Looked like Miami had control. Looked like Ole Miss was going to win. Miami, then Ole Miss. Of course, the hoopla over the pass interference in the last play, which I don't think it mattered, because I think Miami would have stopped Ole Miss anyways, because Ole Miss doesn't like scoring fourth quarter touchdowns when it matters. And of course, after that, it was Indiana pounding Oregon. Game wasn't as close as the score was, and it was 56-23. It felt like it was 156-23, because that's how one-sided it was, which sets up a very compelling national title game between Indiana and Miami. That athletic defensive front led by Ruben Bain and Akeem Mansour going against that Indiana program, that Indiana offense that can beat you so many ways, especially with a quarterback like Fernando Mendoza. Question is, does Miami have a chance? Yes, they do have a chance. I won't go as far as saying they'll win, but they do have a chance because we've seen it. We've seen shockers. But there's something going on in Indiana, real special, and a real power slowly being built in Indiana that it's going to be hard to stop. Now, for Miami to have a chance to win this, they're going to have to find ways to control the clock on this Indiana defense, which Ohio State and Oregon tried to do, but failed because of Indiana defense. I mean, here's one thing people forget. Everybody talks about that offense, which can put points every single which way possible. That Indiana defense can stop you every single which way possible. And that's going to be a challenge for Carson Beck and the Miami Hurricanes when they match up in this national title game a week from tonight. I mean, it's doable. They can beat them because we've seen it. And Ruben Bain is as much of a game wrecker as anyone on that defensive line. But something is building in Indiana. And for you to beat them, you're going to have to play every minute of every game. Nobody has. I mean, the closest one was Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. But we know Ohio State just found ways to implode at the worst possible times. And that's why Indiana won. I mean, I like to use the word juggernaut a lot in sports because I've seen juggernauts find ways to fall off the map. But something's being built in Indiana as a juggernaut. And go into this game a week from tonight, Mario Cristobal is going to have his brain stretched out thinking what the heck he's going to do to these guys to at least have a chance to win. It's going to be a better game than people think. And I get why everyone is assuming Indiana has this thing wrapped up. I'm not ready to make that assumption yet because I've seen it happen before. And everybody has, where a team dominates and just falls off at the worst possible time. Miami can do it. Now, whether they will is another story. But Indiana has something going. And if they complete this a week from tonight, and they're favored to do so, you're looking at the greatest story ever told. And you're going to see sports movies and sports documentaries about what Kirk Cignetti has done with this Indiana program. And it will probably more likely be the greatest football story ever told over the next 15 to 20 years if they complete this. To turn them from a basketball school, especially under the years of the late Bobby Knight, to a football power, the way this Kirk Cignetti has with this university, speaks volumes to the impact that he has. And the thing is, I'll say this also, one thing Miami's going to have to try and figure out. Indiana makes very, very few mistakes. You probably talk about the most well-coached and well-disciplined collegiate football team maybe ever. And that's going to be another obstacle for Miami to try and topple. A lot of things point against Miami. I'm not going to make any assumptions yet. But Indiana has something, and they have all the momentum, especially after how they dismantled Oregon the way they did and Alabama before that. They're just cooking right now. They're the favorites. I'll just leave it at that. We're talking about that probably later in the week. I'll make my official pick. So I'll do it then. So that's the college football angle. Now we go to the world of boxing. Well, so what took place overseas Saturday afternoon. It was Agit Kayabel beating Damian Knyba in a third round stoppage. Stoppage a bit premature, but I thought this Knyba was going to get stopped in that round, or probably a round later anyways, because Kayabel had him solved. One thing I liked about Kayabel is he goes to the body, and more times I haven't seen the fighters do in recent years, and he did it in this fight. And he did pretty well with it. But after getting this win, and I'll admit he looked good, but he didn't look great. He was one of those fake interim championships. There are people who thought he had a shot against Oleksandr Usyk. I don't know if I would go that far after that fight. But to Agit Kayabel, it's now time to stop ducking Oleksandr Usyk. Get in there and let's see what you got. It's now time for that fight to be made. Oleksandr Usyk against Agit Kayabel. And we're going to see if Agit Kayabel takes the fight or he stays ducking. Because we know Kayabel did a lot of ducking when it comes to Oleksandr Usyk. Now, talking about him possibly fighting Fabio Wardley, I think it's going to be a colossal fight. I think the best thing to do, if you want to do this, is have Kayabel fight Wardley. Whoever wins that has a shot at Usyk, because that might be the best thing you can probably do if both Fabio Wardley and Agit Kayabel continue ducking Oleksandr Usyk. And we know that's what's happening. But Kayabel, he looked good, but nothing to wow me to say, okay, he can beat Oleksandr Usyk. The only way either guy can beat Oleksandr Usyk is if Usyk finally starts to show his age, which he's defying father time right now with how he's been in the fight game. And that's probably their only chance. But even that, I'm not even sure of. But it's time for both Wardley and Kayabel to stop ducking Oleksandr Usyk. But if you're going to continue to duck Oleksandr Usyk, how about you two guys fight one another, and the winner faces Oleksandr Usyk, especially if Usyk goes through with this fight with Deontay Wilder, which is rumored all over the place. But it's time for you guys to step up and see what you're made of. Because Oleksandr Usyk's waiting for a challenge, but Agit Kayabel and Fabio Wardley want to continue to duck. That's a problem. So Kayabel got the win. I mean, I thought he looked good, but he didn't look great. But Grant Naba fought a valiant fight, but offered really nothing. But in the grand scheme of things, finding a guy like Oleksandr Usyk needs you to bring more, and I had to see it. But it's probably the most ready he'll be for Usyk, and he better stop ducking Usyk, and let's get that fight made. It's going to be a good one down the line between those two. I mean, I know the only way you're going to beat Usyk at this point is if Usyk starts to really show his age, which is possible, but that's about it. Because Usyk found a way to defy father time every single which way possible. We think about what he did to Tyson Fury and Daniel Dubois. That's all you need to know. Maybe he scared everybody so much, nobody wants to fight him. I understand it. And another one, this one was karma coming knocking on the door of Subriel Matias getting pounded by Dalton Smith. And Subriel Matias, true colors came out over the last year. And how he carried himself going into this fight, people trying to warn him, but we know what happened. Dalton Smith got the knockout win and looked very, very impressive. But for Subriel Matias, you had a positive test after a win, which a guy died in the ring. Great, there's some baloney about sample sizes I'm not even going to get into. You were chasing fights against guys like Teo Lopez and Devin Haney. And you faced Dalton Smith, granted under some odd ruling by the governing body. And with all the talking, the flunked PED tests, and how you conducted yourself after your opponent died in a fight you tested positive in, karma came to you, and it was in the form of Dalton Smith. And I mean, and the boxing world will be great to never see you in the ring ever again because of how you are. Your true colors came out after what happened a year ago where that man died in the ring, and it turned out you flunked a drug test, an initial drug test. Granted, a whole bunch of other baloney I'm not even going to get into. And you calling for fights against guys like Teo Lopez and Devin Haney. And you conducted yourself like a real jerk. And you got a gift wrap ruling by the governing body for a fight that had no business taking place. And because of it, that's why what happened. It was coming. Impressive win for Dalton Smith to come across country to pound this guy. Thank you very much. And I look forward to big things for him down the line. But we might be best served to never have Subriel Matias anything associated with boxing ever again. Because of who he is, how he is, what he is, and what he's become. And then karma came, and it was a thing of beauty. Kudos, Dalton Smith. And as Devin Haney put it, cheaters never win. That's all you need to know. Subriel Matias could have shortcut his way out of a fight out of this, no matter how hard he tried, because Dalton Smith had him, beat him down, send him out the door. Thank you very much, and hope we never see any form of Subriel Matias ever again, because we don't need him. And I conclude with a historical night that took place 46 years ago tonight. This was a fight between Alexis Arguello and Ruben Castillo. Unlike Subriel Matias, I can say this for both Alexis Arguello and Ruben Castillo. They don't cheat the sport. You talk about two terrifically good fighters. And in this particular night, this was a case of the skill of Arguello versus the grit of Castillo. Ruben Castillo, fought everybody, fought the best he could against some of the best of his time. Never managed to win a world title, but managed to hold his own against many guys. And he did with this one. This fight was supposed to be a fight between Arguello and a mandatory challenger named Frankie Baltazar. But because of business, and we know how business is in boxing, that fight never took place. So enter this fighter named Ruben Castillo, of Mexican descent. And this fight taking place in Tucson, Arizona, on ABC's Wide World of Sports. Spanning the globe, thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. With the agony of defeat, the skier dropping all over the place in about 18,000 directions. But there's a reason why they called Alexis Arguello El Flaco Explosivo, and he showed it here, because this was a fight where he was pegged as a 5-1 favorite, and his skill level and his beauty showed. But all credit to Ruben Castillo to make things harder for Arguello than many thought they would. And the challenger tried everything he could. When you fight valiantly enough against a high-skilled fighter and you just can't get over the hump, the greatness of that high-skilled fighter takes over. And that's what Alexis Arguello did to Ruben Castillo. And I said this before. We want to put a peg of the top 20 most beautiful fighters to watch in the ring. If you gave me a list, Alexis Arguello is on the top of it, because he was a case of a fighter. When he threw, he didn't miss. He landed. And those punches he landed on you, he did damage. And that's what he did. And in the middle rounds, after Castillo gave his valiant effort, the subtle move by Arguello to attack the ribs of Castillo was what swayed the fight into his factor. And moving forward, that was why Alexis Arguello got the stoppage win in the 10th round to retain the super featherweight championship. It was that punch that put Castillo down with the body shot, had Castillo in so much pain. Even though he beat the count, you could see he was in pain. And the referee basically thought that was enough. And that's why he stopped it. And the precision of Alexis Arguello in that ring, when he throws, he hits, and when he hits, he does damage, is so effortless. You just gotta marvel at this guy's beauty. And it gets deceptive because he shows no expression in that ring. Because when he throws, it's heavy hands. And we're talking about heavy hands for a fighter who fought at 135 pounds in those weight classes. Because when he put it on you, he was delivering damage. And he knew as this fight was going on, he was going to gradually wear Castillo down, and that's what he did. We talk about Alexis Arguello's place among the elite of the boxing history. You could probably say pound for pound, a top 30 all-time fighter. At least south of the lightweight division, he's way up there. We talk about some of the great little giants. And we talk about Latino greats, and we talk about not just his country, Nicaragua, Mexico, South America, Puerto Rico. It's some of the others. I include Panama because of Roberto Duran. And many of those countries in there. Definitely top 2 or 3. I put him number 2 behind Roberto Duran, who I think is widely number 1. Is not even close. And no disrespect to anybody else, Duran just wipes it all. But Alexis Arguello is behind him. And we talk about his accomplishments south of the lightweight division. At that time, it was unheard of to have that kind of a career of his. And some had good ones, great ones too. But maybe he stands out because he did it in multiple weight classes. And we talk about his tenure as a super featherweight, probably top 5 in that weight class. He's there. Julio Cesar Chavez, who had 10 successful title defenses of a similar title. He's there. Floyd Mayweather. People remember him as from Money Mayweather, but when he was Pretty Boy Floyd at super featherweight, he was cleaning house, and he beat you every which way possible. Some of the guys in that list, Azuma Nelson, Gennaro Hernandez. List goes on and on. Hector Camacho, in terms of talent, is on there at super feather. But number one, in my opinion, is Alexis Arguello, because he did all that before anybody else. And when you reign the roost in that division against the top guys and do it the way he did it for the longest time, it stands out. And that's why he is one of the premier all-time great little big men. Class, charm, beauty, dedication, effortless. And we talk about ring generalship, effective punching, effective aggressiveness. Alexis Arguello mastered it when he was in the ring. And when he ruled the roost in the featherweight, super featherweight divisions, few if any was able to touch him. And that's why he had the career the way he did. And on this night, against a valiant Ruben Castillo, who gave Alexis Arguello all he can handle, he showed it. And when he went to the next level and turned it up after gradually wearing Castillo down with body punching, you saw the difference. And that's why Alexis Arguello is one of the premier all-time greats to ever lace up the gloves. And Ruben Castillo is no pushover. Gave a lot of tough fighters tough fights. Danny Little Red Lopez, Salvador Sanchez, got an outlet shot against Julio Cesar Chavez, and a good fighter. But the difference in class and skill shows when you have that guy who's good enough to hang around versus the great fighter who knows how to get the job done when it matters. And that's what we had here. And that's why Alexis Arguello, 46 years ago tonight in Tucson, Arizona, was able to successfully defend his super featherweight title against a tough challenger in Ruben Castillo. Honest, solid effort by Castillo. But there's a reason why Alexis Arguello is called El Flaco Explosivo. And he showed it because out of nowhere he exploded. And that was the end. And if you want to watch a beautiful fighter who embodied what the sport was and what the sweet science was all about, Alexis Arguello is one I would highly recommend, probably top 5 of my recommendations, because he embodied everything almost to mere perfection. He was just a thing of beauty in that ring. We talk about 3 ways to score a fight: clean, effective punching, effective aggressiveness, and ring generalship. Alexis Arguello did that, and it showed it here. I can point to other fights, but maybe this fight with Ruben Castillo was a perfect example of it. And that's why he's one of the premier all-time greats at any level, a top 5 Latino all-time great at the very least. And anything other than that you want to add on is cherries on the sundae. May God rest the soul of El Flaco Explosivo, Alexis Arguello. And that'll wrap up this edition of All Era Sports with Sirhan. I will be back tomorrow night. If you missed this show or any others, you can catch them on the iHeartRadio and the Apple Podcast apps. If you want to watch the video version, you can catch it on the Spotify app. And the Patreon site, I officially launched it. I will be having articles as the 2026 calendar year is going on, from past to present, as I do here. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. If you take care of yourself first, respect other people's boundaries, and defend your boundaries and not have everyone step on them, all the good things happen. Never let anyone walk all over you, or never let anyone step on your boundaries, because once that happens, nothing else matters. Focus on you, defend your boundaries, respect other people's boundaries, and that's where all the good things will happen. That'll take care of tonight's show. I will be back tomorrow night, and I will relive a historical moment in light heavyweight boxing history. Until then, have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. And for my Texas and Steelers followers, may the best team win tonight. Have a good rest of the night. I'll see you tomorrow.